also see the chat?
Yeah. So hi, everybody.
Hey.
We
Oh, I see it. I got it.
Yeah. So I am here with Will Fox, and we're going to talk about his channel, The Exploration, and we're going to go through his journey, why he started his channel, how he's grown, how his channel has changed over time, and how he has gotten up to over 100,000 subscribers. I'm going to be monitoring the live stream chat. So if you guys have any questions, you can put them in there, and then I will put it in our separate chat box. So do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and why you started your channel?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you to you because as we were talking about just before we went on air, it sounds like we both were part of some kind of YouTuber communities that were nice people, but they just weren't answering the questions that we wanted answered. And I remember specifically there was a forum called YouTube Talk where I mean, for the first, couple months on there, when I was brand new, of course, it all seemed very substantive and wonderful. But after a while, you notice the repetition in the communities. And so you've given us a space now on Slack where we can all talk through some of this stuff about being creators. And it's been valuable to me, but not only was it invaluable, but there's like an emotional aspect that goes along with it of having to talk to other creators who are creating, content within your genre. So thank you for doing this and for, providing this platform for us. So about me, for those of you who don't know, I've been on YouTube since about February of 2015. And I'd say that the first 6 months to a year of that were highly experimental in terms of the content I was creating. I was living abroad and I had just finished my undergraduate degree, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life. I was teaching at that point, and I was, in terms of like my work-life balance, everything was going great. In terms of having a direction for what I wanted to do was not so great. And all I knew is that I missed having political conversations with my cousin, and I wanted to have a voice. And so I started making some really crappy YouTube videos, grainy, like 420 or 3. I don't even know what the aspect ratio was, but it was atrocious. And we used OBS to broadcast some stuff that wasn't even live. And it was just bad. And I made cringeworthy content for a very long time. I still sometimes cringe at what I do, but back then it was very, very, very amateur. And the thing about YouTube, which I'm sure many people watching know, is that over time you jump in this pool, and it's more than just learning to swim. It's like learning to swim while also learning to sew simultaneously, or add in any other like basket weaving, whatever you're doing. It's multifaceted. You're learning production, from writing to audio to video, uploading, SEO. There's just so much that goes into it that I know personally I was just floundering at the beginning, but once you start to get a feel for it, it's worthwhile. And so I had a couple videos that would hit 1,000 views here, 10,000 views there, and eventually I think the first video I had that really took off was a collaboration with Tristan from Step Back History, where we talked about Islam in two separate topics about Islam. And the videos, just because it was a hot topic, and because I argue a little bit of clickbait, it was successful, and that changed how I created. I learned about what sort of things would keep people on the video longer in terms of retention, longer watch periods and watch sessions. Going from there, you're learning to be clickable without being clickbaity, and yeah, just constantly improving. I guess I don't pretend to be some sort of expert, but the reason I'm here is the reason most of you are here, is that I enjoy this process and I enjoy learning about all these different things. And yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought, but that's the one message I would give to anyone watching this is just always be improving and mixing it up. That's the only way to grow.
So when you started out, did you post the videos live because you wanted to build like a community? Because you could have just done like hangouts like separately, just the two of you.
No, I should clarify. I recorded on a broadcasting service, which we did not use to broadcast to anything other than my C drive on my computer. So we broadcasted an MP4 to my C drive, and then I'd upload that to YouTube. So all the the poor audio and video qualities of a live stream, but none of the benefits of having that genuine interaction. It's like the worst of both worlds. It was, I just wanted to put something up and I didn't have the equipment, so I just used what I had. So there was absolutely no thought of community, no thought of what was good and bad. It was simply just what is possible on this rig. And I think even the first videos were Windows Movie Maker, and it was Windows Movie Maker up until maybe, I don't know, until sometime in 2016, I guess. Yeah.
And it was originally called Political Junkie, correct?
Yeah. And I think one of the questions that was given to me was about my name. And I would say that I am the wrong person to ask about being consistent with your branding and name, because I've changed it a few times. I think actually, to go all the way back to the beginning, it was called Fox Cousins, because it's just the name I tacked on there as an afterthought. And then in 2016, I decided, well, you know what? I'm making news for political junkies. So I changed to Political Junkie News. And then a few months after that, I realized, no, wait, I want to call myself the Political Junkie. So I chopped the news off of it, and it was just Political Junkie. And that's maybe 10 to 90 or 10 to 80,000 subscribers was like that. And then I became aware of like someone else who was using the name and realized it also wasn't fitting my content anymore because I was doing history. So I changed it again to the Exploration, which is no longer obviously a reference to me, but to the type of content that I'm creating. That each one of them is going to, the promise to the viewer is that each one's going to be a deep dive into something that's really valuable and informative. So I think the question in the chat was like, does changing your name all the time hurt? I would say it hurts me personally to have to go back in and make those changes. I mean, you'll see like the multi-million subscriber YouTube channels. Sometimes they'll rebrand all at once with like a logo and a new banner image, and it's all done very proficiently, and they communicate that well to their subscribers. I'd say the first couple times I changed the name, especially at the very beginning, I didn't even bother. I just changed it because no one was watching anyway. The last time I changed it to the Exploration, I made sure to leave an explanation for my fans in a comment on my most recent upload so that people could see the logic behind it. And people who saw that video, even if they didn't quite like the name, the new name, they at least understood why I made that change. I think that's the most important thing. I take a very long-term approach to this. Long-term, it's going to be better for my channel and for my community and for my audience if, my name is not what it once was. And so it was a tough decision, and one that I'm still trying to fill in the gaps, right? Like changing the name, I also probably need to get a new logo. There's some channel art that probably needs to get updated. I probably need to get a new profile picture. So these are things I'm working on, but I'm also a student and trying to do internships in the District of Columbia at this moment in my life. So there's just a lot going on. So rebranding is a gradual thing for me. It's not a sudden thing because this is not my full-time job. This is still a hobby that's now becoming more and more worthwhile, but a hobby nonetheless.
So pretty much every time you want to take a new direction with your channel, you've kind of rebranded it so the people coming know what they're getting. So they're not coming and just getting politics anymore or just the Fox Cousins. So you decide to change it, and I would imagine that would help with the clickbaity feel and stuff, because what you're getting.
Exactly. And I think one of the moments that was the most, like, it was very obvious and probably a third party watching, but it was difficult for me, was like I uploaded this video that I loved about the Russian Revolution, and it wasn't performing as I expected. And I kind of had to encounter this hard reality of course it's not performing that well because your name just doesn't match the content. And if somebody's clicking off of the YouTube homepage and they see Russian Revolution, they see someone with the name Political Junkie, they might expect, in my head, you imagine that it's going to be someone just riffing about their opinions on the Russian Revolution and not someone presenting you with a story. So yeah, that's definitely a good way to put it, is every time I've changed the name, it's been because I've changed the direction of the channel, or I've changed the name to fit with the direction of the channel that has been happening for a while. So that's part of the reason why my name now is very vague, because I feel like no matter what I do, there's no way it can't fall into this very large umbrella of exploring topics of information.
Yeah. Gives you more freedom to do what you want. Has your following kind of come with you through all these changes, or did you see abrupt changes at all?
So I would say that my channel is definitely a feast and famine kind of channel. if before I upload any content, if somebody said, how many views are you going to get? You know, how many new subscribers are you going to get on this video? I can tell you at least 10,000 views. And other than that, I have no idea. So sometimes, you know, I upload something with 10,000. Sometimes I upload a video and it gets a million and almost 2 million. My North Korea video is I think my largest thing that I've uploaded. So it's all over the place. And in that way, the first video I uploaded after the name change didn't perform that well, but I don't know if I would associate that with the name change, because the very next one then, which was about Russia, ended up getting about 200,000 views. So I think I would guess, I don't have any like statistics to back it up. I would guess I've lost some people over the years with all the changes. I assume that if I had just stuck with the original name or something, that it might, I don't know if I'd be better or worse off. I think I'd be worse off. To me, it's worthwhile because, like I said, I'm taking the long-term approach here is that I believe in my content, and I believe that what the value that I'm producing is, but I think it's good content, and I'm not as concerned about like having that upward trajectory constantly of growing. Of course, I think about those things and care, but to me, I want it all to match and to work, and so making these gradual changes is worthwhile, even if there's some dip every now and again. So far, so good though, with the most recent change.
So when you're picking these topics, you say you don't necessarily know if they're a hit or a miss, but when you're going through, are you trying to, like with North Korea or Russia, are you trying to pick topics that are timely or evergreen, or like what's your process for that?
Sure, that's a good question. So actually, my North Korea video was a very spur of the moment thing that I created. I was procrastinating on another script, and I just suddenly had this idea that, like, oh my God, the Russian the North Korean prison system would just be so interesting. I just ran with it. And I guess I did have an inkling that it would probably be relatively popular. So sometimes I'll get an idea of like, wow, this would be absurdly clickable, and I'll scribble it down. I definitely do consider that when I'm creating. But other times, like my most recent upload was about the Glorious Revolution in England. And believe me, there's no built-in audience for that. And so sometimes I just post things because I'm passionate about them, and I just want to tell whoever will listen. It used to be, I'd think a lot more about search engine optimization. My History of Islam video definitely falls into that category of I was looking in the search box of what popped up when you typed in the history of, and found the History of Islam, found that there was kind of a hole in the market of, legitimate histories of Islam, and not just like Muslims themselves trying to proselytize their faith or something, or like History Channel documentaries that were ripped from somewhere else. So I'd say the farther you go back in my uploads, the more I was thinking about SEO, and I still think about that from time to time. And I definitely consider, when I'm uploading and putting a title on a piece, what's the best formulation I can give it so that it'll, over time can be evergreen. And in terms of creating content that's timely, I recently made a piece about the German elections, and I created it in a way that it only took me 20 hours or maybe 30 hours tops from start to finish, which is very short. My videos tend to take me 50 to 100 hours to create from research to upload. Or my little Spanish Civil War video was 160 hours, I think, in total. So 20 hours is if I'm creating something that's meant to be timely, that's supposed to tentpole, I make sure that I cut down my production time as much as possible, so that I'm not wasting resources on a video that is inevitably going to be outdated a month later, or even a week later in the case of an election. Yeah.
We talked a step back about like his process of this too, and he realized that there are a lot of like really niche things that he wants to cover, but first you need to gain that audience with the bigger, broader things. You bring them in, and then you can populate some of the little things that no one's ever going to search ever.
I think the industry term for it is like push-pull content, and honestly, I don't know what. I guess push is like you're pushing out your niche stuff to your audience is already there, and pull is you're pulling in new people. I don't know, but the concept definitely exists of like, you have to have a couple hits to bring in some people, and then a few of them are going to like you beyond just that smash hit, or however you want to call it, viral video, and they'll stick around for sure. That's been my experience. Some of my least viewed videos are the ones where I get the most positive feedback. So, and you know, the videos that are the most popular inevitably will have the worst feedback.
Yeah.
And it's a question of time, right? Most of my videos, unless I've made some sort of fatal mistake, will have good feedback for the first week. And for the less viewed videos, that's where the feedback kind of stops because people stop watching and commenting. 90% of the watch time is done. The videos that eventually go on to get 1 million views, that brings in people who don't know who you are, don't care, and they talk about you in the third person like you're the dumbest thing to ever roam the earth. And so yeah, those bringing in those new people, a percentage of them are going to translate into genuine fans that enjoy your content. I think if you're, yeah, for anyone who's looking to kind of put a little spark and a flame under your growth, mastering SEO is a surefire way. Using tags, doing all the things the big channels aren't doing anymore because they think they're, you know, they don't need it anymore, are the things that are now open to you to do if you so choose.
When you do get these spikes, is it like, do your videos get posted on Reddit, or are they just through YouTube search, or like where's the traffic typically come from?
So over the long term, it's absolutely coming from the homepage. Like YouTube is pushing the content to the whatever that box is when you go to the YouTube homepage, or on mobile when you're scrolling. I'd say the first video that went big, that I actually was happy went big, was about the Berlin Wall, and that video was gradually gaining watch time over the course of a week. And about a week after it was live, it was on the maybe like the 12th spot of our videos and the 7th spot of our videos. So it was on Reddit. And I noticed about a week after that is when then the YouTube algorithm like just, you know, opened the floodgates on views. And that repeated a couple times. My North Korean video had a similar trajectory. I don't think it was on our videos. Most of my content is banned from that because of the political nature of what I talk about. But I definitely can notice that if there's just a general, like my videos that are going to get big generally are shared more often, even if that's not bringing in a whole lot of traffic. And I think maybe somewhere deep down in the algorithm that counts. I don't know. But I definitely see a positive correlation between people sharing and my videos going big. What I've never done and what's never worked for me is like actually specifically asking people at the end of a video, please share this as my call to action. I maybe have done that at one point in the past, but I don't do it anymore. I don't know. Something about sending people off the platform at this point. I feel like if I'm sending them off the platform, it should be to Patreon or to Twitter, something like where it's directly related to my channel and not just promotion at this point. But you know,
yeah,
it's not a hard science.
Yeah, because you hear sometimes like if you're the cause of the end of a session, like that's bad towards you, and
sure.
I mean that stuff changes all the time too.
But in general, like I've noticed that there's a homogeneity. I think that's the word, homogeneity. What is that? Social media is becoming more homogenous over time. Every model on every social media platform is becoming about how long can you drag someone onto a feed, like a Facebook feed or a YouTube feed, and how long can you keep them on that platform? And that's all that matters anymore. Twitter recently changed their algorithm to make it that way, and I've noticed a drop off in interactions with any sort of post with an external link. I even, you know, my wife downloaded Skype today for the first time in a while so she could talk with her family. They now have a news feed on Skype. Like somebody's going to be social networking on Skype, right? Like every platform is realizing that if they can create these addictive algorithms to keep you on their platform, then they're going to make money. So anything that sends them off is going to hurt you, no matter what social media you're involved with.
Yeah. This is a weird pivot to Patreon, but I was just at like a Patreon thing that they had in New York recently. And their whole goal is not to keep you on their platform. They're like, we're a membership platform, and they're trying to create other integrations into other social medias or into your WordPress or whatever. They're like, we don't need you to come here. We're not for your attention and your eyeballs.
Yeah.
That's not how we make money.
That's smart. Yeah, their business model is very different. It's good that you pointed that out. Mr. Pessimist over here is just like all social media is the same. Patreon is unique. I love Patreon.
So how's your Patreon going for you? I saw your like announcement video, and like the ratio of likes to dislike was like a little weird to me. I thought,
what was it? I don't know what it was.
It was like 100 and something to like 80. Like that seemed like pretty high. Like whatever it was like
Yeah.
way much higher than your regular videos.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm not used to any. I'm used to like a very out of whack, like in the terms of thumbs up. I don't know what other people's experience are. I did not. I only experienced like a very small amount of like negative criticism, but uh, overwhelmingly, people were either saying I'm supporting you on Patreon or I wish I could. And I honestly, I don't look at my like to dislike ratio anymore. I could care less about it. Um, I look for legitimate feedback in comment sections towards the beginning of an upload. If there's a tragic mistake that I've made on this upload that will now be on the internet till the end of time, that's what matters to me, and that's what I look for in comments. But in terms of like to dislike, I just don't worry about it. The day that I launched my Patreon, I was looking at the number of pledges I was getting, and it didn't even occur to me to look at the like dislike ratio, because I think it's that inconsequential. In fact, one of my first videos that got over 1,000 views was about the UK elections. It was like CGP Grey ripoff, and it had a very like 50-50 like the dislike ratio. I actually think that was a good thing because people were interacting with the video, right? Leaving angry comments, hitting the dislike button because I mixed up the colors of labor and conservative, and that actually helped me. So despite the fact that I don't like to make mistakes, you know, in terms of looking at the like and dislike and knowing whether that's going to hurt or help your channel, I'd say it's a mulligan. You have no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good question because I've never looked at it. So I'm happy to know that was the case. People don't like people who are trying to make it online. You know, I guess they look at some of us and think, well, you must be just rolling in the dough and doing great, and like, how easy is your life? Go get a real job. But oh my God, like I don't make a full-time income from YouTube. If I really wanted to, I need to switch up and do some daily content about things that were much more inconsequential or just very topical all the time. And I actively have chosen not to do that because I'm passionate about the content I'm creating. And if it's never a full-time job for me, I really don't care. I want to tell stories on video. I love doing it. And people tend to hate on, they'll say things like, you know, internet work is not real work, and they're wrong. And I just, you know, I think most of us have learned over the years just to dismiss those kind of people because they're not really part of your community. They're not. I'm much more hurt by someone who watched a video of mine and said, wow, your research was terrible, which, you know, that I haven't had that yet, but you know, your research was so bad and therefore I'm leaving. That hurts.
Yeah.
You know, someone saying, oh, you're trying to monetize your content, you sell out, that doesn't hurt me in the slightest because I believe in what I'm doing.
Yeah, and they've probably never tried to make a video before in their life.
Yeah, they don't know how many hours goes into it. And yeah, I mean, I love doing it. I'd say that there are parts of the slog of production that I enjoy less. One of them is cutting together audio and cutting together video. That melts my brain. But there are parts of it that I would never give back. I love the fact that I'm forced to read constantly and consume information from a variety of places about philosophy and politics and history so that I can be better. I am so thankful that I have received that gift essentially from the internet, and having a voice online, being able to voice an opinion or to give an analysis and have people value it. That's really special to me. So, you know, it's just a grueling process of learning and getting better. And I've been addicted for a couple of years now.
And the chat says, how and where do you do research? And is that part of the reason you started Patreon? Because research is like getting books and stuff is expensive.
Yeah. One of my Patreon goals is actually, like, I think it's the next one at $500 a video, is I'm going to start investing. Because right now I kind of do a mixture of purchasing books and checking them out from my library because I'm a student now. I can. And so at $500 a video, I think I've dedicated to, like, you know, investing in these authors are doing lots of work and they deserve to have their books purchased. If I'm going to read it for a video and put it on the internet, I feel like they deserve their royalty fee or whatever they get when I make the purchase. So, yeah, part of the fan funding is about buying books. It's also about the time that goes into reading and consuming that kind of content. I think some of the biggest content creators who are consuming lots and lots of information, generally have teams around them, and I don't at this point. And so part of the Patreon is about supporting my more or less, very, very more sporadic uploads, right? Like every month, every 6 weeks. I think my last one was 7 weeks in between. That's the nature of creating a script and telling a story about complicated stuff and doing it well. And so Patreon is definitely a reflection of my content pace. That's why I do it per video, because I know I'll probably never get beyond 2 full explorations in a month, and therefore, any pledge is affordable, and it drives me to create, because they don't pay unless I create. Was that the answer to the question, or was there a little bit more to the question that I missed?
That was the answer to my question. The chat said, how and where do you research? And they also pointed out the authors get royalties from library checkouts too.
Oh yeah, I did not know that. I just learned something. That's great. I'm gonna go just max out my library card now for John Meacham Adorn's good one. Where do I research? So I usually start where everyone else starts when they're researching. I Google something, or I come across it in something else I'm reading and I mark it down and Google it later. But Google is basically the beginning and ending point of research. I start there, Wikipedia, and then I usually go into the sourcing in Wikipedia and see where they're getting information, assuming I found something that I like. I look at news organizations like the New York Times and Washington Post. I'll put in date ranges if I'm doing some current events about a specific point in time on Google. I usually try to exhaust the obvious internet first. So I try to exhaust everything I can find on Google and on Wikipedia and through all those links first. Anything I can find on my bookshelf second. And then if I really need a very specific piece of information, that's when I start going into databases, which I realize are not available to everyone. So I don't want to push everyone to go that route. But I do find things like ProQuest, JSTOR, what's that other one? LexisNexis is a new one that I'm learning how to work. But essentially, my university's research page is a place I end up going to last when I need some sort of really detailed, specific piece of information. I'd encourage anyone watching this who doesn't have access to those kind of databases through a university, if they're a student, to consider your local library and ask them if they have research databases. And if not, request that they do, because reading about a historical event and a specific aspect of a historical event is much more possible when you're on a place like JSTOR. On that note, I would just, if I can just change the topic slightly for a second here. I think that people, now that I've got a little bit more of a voice on this platform, I've been doing this for a few years and I'm growing. One thing I'm going to be pressing for as I continue to grow and continue to improve is to push other creators to cite their sources better. Whether that be, I've gotten a little pushback on parenthetical citations in subtitles, but maybe putting just a footnote number in a subtitle and then having that correlate to a footnote subtitle or a footnote in the description, some sort of system to cite where you got information from. It's not just the ethical thing to do. It's not just good form, but I can add on another thing to that. That's how you learn whether or not you've made mistakes. Because if somebody comes and says, wow, this is so wrong, and you say, well, I got it from this source, and you find out that source was bad, that's how you get better for the future. And so your creation process needs to be more than just paraphrasing Wikipedia. And if you are paraphrasing Wikipedia, then you need to cite it so that people can correct you if there's something wrong on Wikipedia. It's not about being an elitist and saying that, oh, I have all these databases and I have all this wonderful, access to books that you don't have. It's about saying, if you take a piece of information from somewhere, it's ethical, it's good form, and it's good for you. You have your own self-interest in it to cite that and put that out there for your audience to know where you got that information from. I'd say that YouTube is just an unbelievable plague of citation, and I don't know if you want to call it plagiarism, but just, I paraphrased this book, and now at the end of the video, I will tell you that this was from a book, or even worse, I'll just slip that it's from a book in the description. I think that's just not good behavior for people who are maybe doing this professionally, if they're, at a account. So, yeah.
So you think either in the closed captions or in the descriptions, people should put this is what was used at these timestamps or something like that?
Yeah. So what I've been doing, and what seems to have been fine for me so far, was if I'm using a book, well, let's say, what do I have on this shelf here? The Healing of America by T.R. Reid. It's about healthcare. You know, I'm not talking about using APA or anything special. I'm just saying that maybe if you use some sort of fact from this guy Reid's book, at the end of that line in your script, you'll just put a parentheses and write Reid, comma, page 112 or chapter 3 or something simple, or even just parentheses Reid, you know, just something to where in a year from now, when someone comments and says, wow, that doesn't sound right. 1 pound of chocolate per chocolate chip cookie, that doesn't make any sense. You can say, no, I got this recipe from here. Here's the source. Or, you know, you can find out that the source was wrong. I'm leaving some sort of a trail behind so that people can find that information. I think is important. I think I got some feedback about, you know, people with legitimate hearing disabilities then having to wade through your citations in the subtitle file. I think that's legitimate criticism, and I considered it when I got it. And I think that a good alternative would be to add maybe just a number, like the number 1, and do footnotes in your description. That might be a good alternative. So that way people with legitimate hearing disabilities, they have nothing more than a number. You know, a little number is not going to distract from reading. And in no other way does it distract from like reading a book. You get little footnotes like that all the time. And it still allows you a medium by which to cite your sources better. I just think it's critical. And again, I'm trying to always be better. I don't pretend to do this perfectly, but I do claim to be on the quest to be better and to make other people be better in that regard.
In our little side chat, I just put copy and pasted stuff from the chat.
Okay.
They had questions / comments about citation.
Okay. Let's see. My art. Let's see. Art explains, as science and history, my research process is extremely in-depth generally, and I create a publicly available reference page for almost all of my videos. So I agree it's a lot of more professional and scientific. However, the bad thing is that people who don't cite things carefully have advantage on YouTube, in my opinion. I'd like to see that change. Right now, speed of video release trumps. Yeah, generally true. People who don't cite their citations are taking a shortcut in that they're not doing so. But is it really that hard to take an extra second? Like if you're reading a book and you see the sky is blue in the book and you write the sky is blue in your script, or theoretically, if you're paraphrasing or trying to make it different, you'd be like, the evidence shows us that the sky is not green, but rather blue, whatever you're doing. Is it really that hard to put the author name and the page number in that script? Is that so difficult? I don't think it's that difficult to cite your source. You're getting the information from somewhere. Cite your source. Now, if you're saying that people who just throw out, you know, recitations of Wikipedia pages have advantages because of the content grind, I'd say you're totally right, and I don't have a remedy for it. That's on YouTube's side of promoting constant uploads and not promoting, you know, content that's. I'm not saying that YouTube never promotes content that's well thought out. Clearly, that's not the case. But you know, there's clearly built-in algorithmical advantages to posting very, very often, and that's not on our end. And so the only thing that we can do is deal with our sphere of influence and what we have control of, and that is your own ethics, your own conscience, and your own self-improvement over time. I think in the long run, people who cite their sources and are diligent about it, about getting legitimate information, are doing better by their audience, and in turn, their audience will do better by them in loyalty and in building a community that's valuable. Just my 2 cents.
And if I think YouTube's probably not the end game for most of us anyway, because of that grind and stuff. So if you're going for other avenues after YouTube, that would be more helpful for you to have that. That's
a great point. I mean, I'm living in DC right now, and I've gotten a few interviews based on the fact that I've got this content creation background. I'm still a student. I'm transitioning, you know, I'm doing internships and transitioning to like a new full-time career away from doing like English teaching and stuff. And I can tell you that people, when they can see that you're a multifaceted person with multiple skills, that you're not just, you know, hardworking and dedicated, but you can actually prove here's some things that I've created, and here's the long list of skills that go along with that. It says a lot, and I can tell you it's opened a few doors for me, or it's at least cracked them open, and I haven't quite stepped through yet. So definitely think about what your end goals are, and if YouTube full-time is your end goal, then maybe cut some corners, but That's not. I just don't think it's good form.
And then Alliterative says, we list our references for each video, but we haven't footnoted each fact. Our info density makes that complicated. We cite multiple sources per sentence, but I have thought about the issue. Our research notes are all cited and tracked, but there's a lot of synthesis between the research notes and the scripts. We'll think about it, how and if we can be more precise.
Yeah, I love y'all's content, by the way. It's hypnotic to like see the word connections, and I think you're doing a fine job. If you're citing sources below, you know, maybe not sentence by sentence, but if you're putting forth an effort to say where the information came from in the best way that's reasonable for you, I think you're fine. You don't need to worry about it too much. Generally speaking, my concern is not about people who are doing their best and not being perfect, because I include myself in that group of people who are just kind of trying our best to cite and to provide people with more reading afterwards. My concern is not with people like that. My concern is with the big boys and girls up at the top, 10 million subs, creating educational content, and then paraphrasing a book and at the end being like, oh yeah, this is from a book, by the way. You can buy it and give me even more monetization. That to me is just whack. That's terrible. So if anybody, I hope nobody out there takes this as some sort of an attack on them personally. I just hope everyone will just strive to be better. But yeah, Alliterative, you too. I like the content you're producing, and I think you're just fine. So don't worry.
And then Miriam's on here, and she said, I tend to create annotated bibliographies in my descriptions, mainly because I've worked in broadcast TV, and there are very strict regulations for closed captions.
Yeah. Broadcast is pretty intense in terms of the closed captioning. So if I come across, I'm always willing, at least I like to think of myself as someone who's willing to change based on evidence. If someone comes across one day and says, listen, even your numbers according to footnotes in the description messes with my ability to read your closed captions, I'll change it. I will. I'll find a different way to do it. Maybe a Google Doc that I link in the description, or with like an annotated script, or just some way. But I guess no matter how much my channel grows, and when I start bringing in more people, I'm going to demand that sources are cited as best as possible. I just think it's good form. And I know that when I made fatal mistakes, like, you know, big mistakes in earlier videos, a lot of times is because I was just in a hurry and I just didn't even really double check some sort of fact that I read on a website or something, and then I mess it up. So double checking facts as part of citing sources is going to make your content better anyway. So why not find a way to do it and deliver it in the way that works for your channel and doesn't mess with any sort of communities that you've built.
And I don't think they'll fix it, but we have asked for like how they have general music for YouTube. We've asked for, can you create ways for people to get research papers so it's not behind paywalls for us or for viewers, and maybe like have Citation go along with it.
Oh man, that sounds nice.
that was like our hope and dream that Peter asked for last year.
There's another. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, mine's more of a tangent, so go.
Okay, I was just gonna say there's also like a style that it involves more production time, so I guess it's like another challenge. What I've said, I think, is the easiest way. Just find a way to, as you're writing your script, just inserting a little parenthetical or a number. One of the things that I've seen on television is there's a show called Adam Ruins Everything, where they cite their sources kind of in a little scroll in the bottom left corner, where like they'll say, oh, you know, the sky is blue, and then you'll be like, oh, the sky is blue. Sky Research Studies Journal, you know, version 3, and it's in the bottom left, just in very small white text, or in the top left, or, you know, somewhere where it's not intrusive, but nonetheless you can see it. That's obviously more time behind the editor's chair. So I don't know if that's or in the editor's chair, but it's just another way that, you know, there are people out there doing a relatively good job of citing sources. But, yeah, that's probably enough citation of sources talk.
Yeah, Miriam says if that pie in the sky hope ever happens, it's probably because you get stuff for putting notes on lyrics for the music side.
There you go.
My
that's
citation.
where you have to cite your sources.
Yeah, my citation question was I don't know if he'll be able to help or anyone in the chat, and I think I might have asked this before, but I used to have an app on my phone that I could scan the barcode and it would create a citation for me, and it would also, I could put in the page numbers and all that, but it got taken over by someone else and it doesn't really work anymore. No. Does anyone know of an app like that? It was magical and wonderful.
I don't know about a phone app, but I do know about, for Google Chrome, there's an add-on called Zotero that's open source that I use, where especially, it doesn't work as well on PDFs, but if you're reading the New York Times and you're like, oh, I want to cite the New York Times, it's as simple as clicking on like the add-on button in the top right of Chrome, and Zotero auto sorts it into a folder that you get a little program, and it auto sorts it into a folder so that you can theoretically, when you're done with your research paper, you copy your bibliography and you paste it in your document and you're done, right? You double check to make sure authors' names have been correctly placed in there in years and things, but otherwise it's like auto sourcing. I don't actually use APA on YouTube, but when I write research papers for school, I use that all the time. It saved me hours and hours and hours of work, without a doubt.
And Alliterative said they didn't take any of that personally.
Okay. I didn't think you did, but just making sure.
I think there are more questions that happened in the Slack beforehand. They asked, what's your favorite video and why? Why is it your favorite video? And do you remember the process behind the creation of that video?
Yeah. A lot of my favorite videos are imperfect. I'd say the one that I was the most passionate about, the two that I was most passionate about were the Spanish Civil War video that I created on location in Madrid. I had a moment where I was, I had taken some time off teaching. I was a freelancer in Germany, so I was lucky enough to have the ability to do that. And I spent a significant amount of time in Madrid researching about Madrid. And if I'd read about a place, I'd mark it down on my paper, and I'd actually end up going there and taking a look. And by doing that comprehensive research, I think I cited maybe 5 or 6 books that I read from cover to cover in the video. And then, in the general, I think I read maybe 10 or 11 different pieces of literature on the Spanish Civil War, and specifically about the Battle for Madrid. And there was something really special for me about being in the place I was researching. And once I was in a big park called Retiro, and I was reading about Retiro Park in Retiro by pure coincidence, and I saw a little map. History books have little maps, and I saw like the park that I was sitting in, and I realized how lucky I was to have that opportunity. I don't take that for granted at all, and I realized it's not possible for everyone. It's not possible for me very often, but I just took the one chance I had to do an on-location documentary, and I just loved it. I got more in touch with that topic than any other topic that I had ever covered. Going to the University of Alcalá in the northwest portion of Madrid and seeing how their psychology building still has pockmarks from bullets for the battle that took place there, where students don't even know, they just walk by because it's such an old and painful history. That was just magical for me, and could produce more content like that in the future, I would love to. The problem is it's time consuming and it's really hard.
Yeah.
Going out to an on-location spot in a public place, like there was this really, really famous place called the Plaza Mayor where I filmed the intro to that video, and I must have filmed there over the course for like that 1 minute take. It must have been recorded at least 30 to 50 times of just trying to get it right. God forbid a car comes by or someone makes a face in the camera, or I mess up one word because I don't have a teleprompter, or I didn't have a teleprompter at that time. And there's just so much that can go wrong. Or the sun is setting and it messes up the lighting. If you watch that piece again, you'll notice all of the learning pain and like the growing pains of trying to create a documentary all alone, or occasionally with the help of your wife, on location. It's just not easy. So it's the most rewarding piece of content I've ever created because it was so difficult and because I was so passionate about it. And therefore that would be my absolute favorite. Was that more or less an answer to the question?
Yeah. And they had a follow-up, and it might be the same video. They said, what video did you learn the most from and why?
Yeah, I mean, definitely that one. The other one that is, I guess, the cliche answer that I think if anybody listened to the YouTubers United podcast or whatever, they've heard this a million times now. But the one that was like a turning point for the channel was the Berlin Wall video, where I realized that it wasn't just about giving some sort of chronological explanation of facts. It was about telling a story, and changing that in my mind of like, I want to use story structure and do creative nonfiction. It's changed every piece of content I've created since, including things that were more timely and news related. My video about Germany could have just been like a newscaster using the pyramid structure. If anybody's familiar with journalism, right? You put the most important fact first, second most important fact second, and then it narrows down to the least important information. And or I guess that's called a reverse. Yeah, no, a pyramid. Yeah, pyramid. And so I decided, like, after that video about Berlin, I decided, no, I'm not doing chronology. I'm not doing some sort of headline based stuff. That pyramid is gone. I'm using whatever structure makes the most sense to tell a story, and that's just changed everything for me. So that would be the answer to that question.
So how do you go about writing a script now? Because I'm trying to do more story kind of oriented things, and I usually start out with, these are the things I want them to learn. Like, you have your facts that you want them to do.
It's a very
then how do you
mindset. Yeah.
yeah, and then how do you change that into like a story?
Yeah, that reminds me of like learning objectives from my teaching days, which I think is important, right? You want to have some overall things that you want to impart, but I guess what I would say is, when I started the Berlin Wall video, I was looking at the entire history of Berlin, all of it, and I isolated that story down to just the section between the fall of Berlin and the erection of the Berlin Wall. And I think if you're looking at some sort of wide topic, I'd consider how narrow can you focus it, without completely losing the plot, is what it was the first thing I would say, which involves, of course, then knowing a lot about the topic that you're covering. It involves a really intense level of research that you can get into the granular details at times, or just look at one, snapshot of the picture and tell a story there. So that's what first thing I would recommend is looking at where you can narrow your focus in order to tell a better story. I guess part of that answer is also number 2, which is really exhaust your sources as best you can. Again, it's counterintuitive on YouTube, where the content grind is continually asking you to upload, but taking your time to really know your subject and to know it intimately so you can make connections in your brain, I think is vast. It's very, very important. Along those lines, reading literature, reading books, listening to audiobooks is what I've gotten into a lot recently, and informative podcasts, and making, disparate connections between different topics, I think is really important. To get more specific, because those are all very vague tips, I would say go onto YouTube or Google and look up 3-act story structure and find out what it is a formula, and you don't want to tell stories as a formula. However, just as training wheels teaches someone how to ride a bike, eventually those training wheels can come off. Storytelling structure and learning, getting a feel for 3 acts is, I think, very important. And I use 3-act story structure even when I don't have a logical protagonist. So my most recent big upload was a collaboration with Soliloquy. Hey, Jonathan, if you're watching this. And the protagonist of that video was a concept. It was the idea of world government. It wasn't a person. And nonetheless, I could take you on a journey, the hero's journey, just like Luke Skywalker or Frodo Baggins, of the idea of world government from Act 1 to Act 3 in that piece. And I don't claim to do this well, or I'm learning along the way. I'm still checking out books now about narrative, and I have on my Amazon wishlist books about storytelling. But familiarizing yourself with the structure and trying to see if you can, tell a story in that way, and considering motif and considering some sort of wider theme. Watch a TED Talk by, I think, the CEO of Pixar about what storytelling is. He calls it conflict over time. Just having these general ideas in your head, and if you ever get writer's block, going back to them and just exploring what real masters of the craft are doing, observing people who tell great stories that you enjoy. And if you get writer's block, going and seeing what they're doing and then coming back and trying to write more, that's helped my process tremendously. Does that answer your question about storytelling? And
when you do storytelling, have you seen that your audience retention is longer now that it's less facts and more stories?
It's going to seem counterintuitive. It's a little bit less, but my view counts are much higher. The reason I don't think is because I'm telling stories. Actually, my audience retention dipped a little bit when I started using live action with my face and intersplicing my face with animation. There's something hypnotic, I think, about having animated content where every 3 seconds something jumps. Like when I was doing that kind of purely animated content, my audience retention was higher. But my view counts and my subscriber count and my feeling of community and my positive feedback and Patreon support, like all that came after I transitioned to storytelling and using my face on camera. So I took a hit in terms of audience retention, also because I increased the length of my videos dramatically from an average of 5 to 7 minutes to 15. I think the max I've done is 25 minutes. That also obviously has an impact on retention. So I would say that if there's been a small amount of negative effect on retention, it's well worth it when you're making a positive connection with your audience and telling a story that they can really get involved with. I just, all I can say is that when I watch content where somebody doesn't just list facts or use a typical news structure and actually considers what their thesis is and tells me some sort of a narrative with a nice wrap up, I gobble that up and just enjoy that content without a doubt. So I just decided I wanted to apply that to my own writing, and it's worked out pretty well.
And they probably have more of a connection with you now that you're on camera and stuff too. For
sure.
Do you want to talk about collabs? Because I think that was probably one of the biggest boosts for your channel, right?
For sure. Growth. Yeah. I did a couple collabs there at the early 2016, I think, which were relative successes for sure. Like my first collaboration, I guess really my first collaborations were like little hangouts I did on Christy Winter's channel. That I don't know if that counts as a collaboration, but then Tristan and Name Explain and Jonathan, and Mr. Beat from Mr. Beat's Social Studies channel did quite a few collaborations, and some were big successes, some were moderate successes. I'd say that the videos, there's something about pushing people to another community and accruing watch time in that way, and saying at the end of your video, go watch something else now, I think is a powerful tool. Would some of those videos have been big without the collaborative effort? I think so. They probably would have been fine, but I think there's a boost that goes along with it that that's measurable. And of course, if you look at analytics at the card clicks and the subscriber numbers on those days on like Social Blade, I mean, you can see those bumps. They definitely help. I wouldn't say that's the decisive factor in my growth, but it's been nice, and it's definitely helped me make friends on this platform who I then can use as resources. In fact, the people I collaborated with are the people that led me on to this We Create EDU group. So without those collaborations, I probably would have never even gotten on this Google Hangout to talk to you guys today. So I'd say that the benefit of working with other creators is immeasurable. It's wonderful. And in a lonely little hobby like we have here, where it's just you and the computer all the time, it's very nice to break through that wall and collaborate with another passionate person.
Because I'm guessing since you don't churn out content because you try and thoroughly research and you have other things going on, that the two ways that you get boosts in the algorithms are probably the content that you have, like the Berlin Wall or something that like gets picked up with a good title and SEO, or a collaboration. Yeah. And I've seen just with the people in We Create EDU, when they use the same hashtag to collaborate, then their channels are like intrinsically linked too. So so when like Step Back will put something up, you're more likely to be suggested video for him.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I've noticed, especially when you're watching, like I watched a video what am I saying? I created a video recently. My most recent upload had Name Explain, Patrick from Name Explain. At the end, I used his wonderful British voice to voice the English Bill of Rights, and he did a great job. But it was just the last maybe like 30 seconds of the video, and I thanked him in the script, and then in the description of the video, I left his name. I said, go subscribe or whatever. But it wasn't a full-on collaboration. Nonetheless, a few of his videos were definitely in the sidebar. And so, yeah, YouTube makes those connections. There was a point in time where the people I was collaborating with were listed as related channels. That's not as much anymore. I think YouTube over time figures out if you really are directly related in that way. Topically, I assume is how they do it. But yeah, you link your channels to a great extent. And that stream, assuming it's a video that will have a long tail of general viewership. You know, my collaboration with Tristan from a couple years ago still gets a couple hundred views a day, if not a couple thousand. I haven't looked, but you know, that's a constant trail to his channel, and his video about it is a constant trail back to my channel. That, you know, that work was done all so long ago that I can barely remember the script and the video itself. And nonetheless, because we're on the internet, and because all this is, I don't want to say permanent. That sounds a bit too utopian, but because all this stuff is there seemingly for the long term, those connections are always going to be put in place and always going to be boosting you at least a little bit, creating those links.
And the Slack also asked, did you have moments that you felt like you weren't growing fast enough?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I can definitely say that I am one of those people that did not, like I said at the beginning of the stream, I did not come in onto YouTube as an instant success or even knowing really what I wanted to do, and continually changing and continually growing. And therefore my first 100 subs took me, I think, 12 months or something. Like, I really think it took me about that long. I can't remember exactly, but it was a long time to get 100 subs. And I remember, like, one time I uploaded a piece of content and I got excited because it went from 17 to 18 views. So like I definitely grinded my way past the first 100, past the first 1,000. The first 1,000, the first 10,000 went pretty quick because it was because of one video. And then there was a grind for a while, and then my Berlin video took off and took me up to like 40, 50,000. Then there was a really long grind until my North Korea video, and that took me farther. So I have this feast and famine mentality, and every time there's a famine, I get frustrated. I get really angry and frustrated, not at any one or any entity in particular. Oftentimes it's, you know, directed at myself for not being more consistent or being more creative in the moment to type. But I absolutely know the feeling of not growing fast enough, because I have absolutely been there, and have, you know, even when I have success, usually that's followed by a gradual dip back to obscurity for a while until I have that next big hit. So, yeah, definitely have felt that way. The only thing to do is to continue to self-improve, make even better content, find a new skill to learn, and just push through. That's the only way to get past that frustration.
And I think it was this past year that you went from 50,000 to 100,000, right?
Yeah.
I think everything before that was like the grind up to there, and now you've kind of got the ball rolling a little more.
I hit 50,000 sometime in 2017. So that last 60,000, I guess, 60 to 65,000 was all done in a year. And I don't know. That was actually, what's interesting about that is my growth increased, but my uploads, for 2016 or for 2017, the number of like full on researched uploads was like 7 or 8. Like, most people upload, there's channels that upload 7 or 8 videos a day or a week. And so I can be nothing but thankful to people who watch me, to subscribers, to YouTube, and to whatever the Greek gods, whoever you want to say thank you to, for the fact that I could upload less and grow more. That is only a, you know, that's something I can only be happy about. And that's I think that speaks to volumes about what you're uploading, right? If you can take something, now that I've got the model, that's really what I'm looking at going forward, is now that I have a working model that I think people enjoy and that I like to create, I feel good about creating. Now it's about, okay, how do I develop a system where I can really do this on a consistent basis? It's going to always be hard as a student. I think part of it's incorporating a lot more B-roll, and maybe incorporating a teleprompter. I just bought one, a little iPad teleprompter. It's about improving the system in which I created now that I have a model, and streamlining that so that maybe this can become a twice a month kind of operation. And then I can only hope that the growth can be even greater. But that's my own, you know, personal project going forward, is how do I be more consistent so I don't squander the growth every time I get essentially an algorithmic gift from YouTube saying, oh, we like this most recent upload, please give us more. And me saying, see you in 8 weeks, YouTube, bye. Being more consistent and actually, you know, capitalizing on the gifts I'm given by YouTube essentially is, you know, something I've really got to be better at.
And I find it pretty amazing that it's been the past year too, because from other channels we have that do politics and history, it seems like it's gotten rougher out there for such channels.
Yeah. I I would agree. I I really would attribute it to like the occasional breakout success, right? It really does just take one video that's really well made that you're proud of, that people enjoyed it, to take you to the places you want to be. And in terms of monetization, I'd say more often than not I have monetization troubles, but it usually gets resolved. So I'd say the adpocalypse is real. But I've been lucky enough to have kind of weathered that storm. Part of it for me was when I heard about these new algorithmic changes. Again, feast and famine, I was already used to it. And so hearing about it, I was like, well, all right, that's fine. I'm not doing this full time. I'm just going to keep creating content. And I didn't let it distract me from doing what I do.
And I know we only have a few minutes left before you have to leave. So I just wanted, is there anything else you wanted to go into before?
Sure. Let me look at this list, because I wrote a few things down that I thought would be good to talk about. If anybody is watching this and isn't growing at the rate they want, I would say look at, because there's someone who's contrary to my opinion, and that is a guy by the name of Matthew Colville, who does videos on Dungeons and Dragons, and he uploads just talking head videos, just turns on his webcam, talks, and does jump cuts, kind of like the Vlogbrothers. And he just finished a Kickstarter where he generated over $1 million for a project of his. All right. So, wildly successful guy, none of the production. Arguably, he's been researching his whole life because he knows this stuff like the back of his hand. Nonetheless, he breaks, like in my world, at least, he breaks all the rules of like put together a really, really professional, well thought out production as best you can and always be no. He just dives in, and he's got what I consider to be a very, very specific audience that already existed, right? The D&D community is voracious for that kind of content. And so he tapped into that, and he just exploded into growth. And I would just recommend to anybody who's listening to this and is trying to take lessons from me is consider not taking lessons from me. If this is really what you want to do, consider juxtaposing my growth in my channel with someone like him who's tapping into a very, very specific niche and just insta success. Yeah. The real trick on YouTube, if this is the platform you want to make a career and a job and, have your success on this platform, that's the way to go. It's not my way. And that's not just some sort of like humble, like, I'm pretending, fawning that I'm not. No, I'm not particularly successful. I don't consider myself a wonderful video craftsman or something. I'm just doing my best out here. And there are people that are doing far better. And if you want to really shine on this platform, go listen to them. go learn from the best. Yeah. What else? Hold on. Let me see. Branding. Oh, this is something I've got to be better at. We kind of talked about branding. I got to get a new profile picture and little animated intro. Working on that. Ignore everyone who says to grow you have to be on Twitter and social media. That's all great. But it doesn't have to be that way, at least at the beginning. I regret now not being more involved in social media and other platforms. But at the very beginning, if your goal is to grow on YouTube, focus on YouTube, right? And at 1,000, 10,000, somewhere around there, you can really start to consider how you're going to branch out. But if you're brand new to the YouTube platform, learn that platform first and then branch out. Let's see what else. Tent polling around big events. Yep. We talked about SEO sources, definitely there. And don't be afraid if you're not creating the content that you think is going to take you to the stars right now. Don't be afraid to be iterative, to grow by changing and by trying out new things, because it worked for me, and I think it can work for anybody who's dedicated to being better. Yeah, that's everything I had on my list of little things I wanted to give back to this community at 100,000 subs. We Create EDU is great. I love coming here. I wouldn't say I come here every day, but every few days I click a little button and see what's going on, and it's just nice to know there's a group of people out there that are also on the journey with me. And
I know your podcast doesn't have more episodes, but if people wanted to find out more about your journey, they could go to the podcast, correct?
For sure. Yeah, they could go listen to me and Tristan riff on the YouTubers United podcast if they want to know about my journey in a long form. If they're looking for the elevator form, just like here's a minute of what happened, maybe go check out one of the Q&As or just watch this live stream. I think we covered it pretty well.
And Brian asked, what's your elevator pitch for your channel?
Speaking of elevators, elevator for pitch for my channel. So there are a type of people out there that enjoy the news and they enjoy learning about history. Not everyone's like that, and not everyone can consider themselves well informed. I'm creating content for people who already think they're informed to be even more informed than they thought they were. Right. So if you're someone who watches the news or reads history books and think that you're well informed, my goal is to give you something that is way beyond what you thought you knew before. At least that's the elevator pitch, right? It's deeply researched political and historical explorations, and that's what I strive to do with every upload, is to put something unique in the world and give people who already consider themselves information junkies that fix that they need.
And I think it's good that you know that that's your audience too. So when you're forming the stories, you know what level of detail you're supposed to be at.
Exactly. That's what I guess that's a good thing I should specify, is like back in the day, my goal was to create content for people who maybe didn't like politics and like try to kind of, reel them in. And you'll see that on the news sometimes. Like I was watching the BBC earlier this morning, and they were like, the debt to GDP ratio. Oh, GDP. That's like the size of the economy. For those of you who don't like that kind of condescension, like I'm going to drag the ill-informed along with me, and I'm going to condescend to them all the time. I'm skipping right past that. If you're not in the conversation already, then you're probably not going to really enjoy my content in a very big way. That's not to say I'm never willing to explain something. Clearly that's not the case. But yeah, I know my audience is already relatively well informed, and I just go into creation with that expectation. And that, yeah, I like what I'm creating much better now than back when I was trying to convince someone who didn't care about Iowa caucuses to care about Iowa caucuses. I'm much happier now creating for people who already care. It's a lot easier.
But I know you have something coming up pretty soon. So do you probably need to get going?
Yeah, I got about, if there's another question or two, I got a 5 more minutes. I'm going to dinner for a birthday, but yeah, the restaurant's like right down the street, so there's no problem at all.
I think in the Slack they said, what is one of the things that you discovered when you weren't doing, that you weren't naturally doing, that helped you grow?
I mean, I think we really just covered it right then. It was transitioning from a general audience to a specific audience, and transitioning from a listing of the facts to a more storytelling, narrative structure based content creation, and learning how to edit video. None of this came naturally to me. Getting a camera, getting a mic, learning the Adobe suite for editing, none of that came natural for me. And one of the things I still struggle with to this day is things like graphic design and like creating visuals on the screen that look good. None of that comes naturally to me in the slightest. So, but to answer the question, focusing on those things and just knowing what my weaknesses were goes a long way, right? Because if I know I really suck at creating animations, I can verify with someone before I upload, hey, does this look juvenile? And therefore I can, improve over time. But I guess that's the real answer is, yeah, fact listings to storytelling, general to specific audience, and just knowing what you don't know. Moving the vagueness and the difficulties of YouTube into a column and a list of things that you want to improve on will change the way that you create, no doubt about it.
So since you could continuously keep researching, or you could continuously keep trying to make that graphic better, how do you come to a point where you're just like, this is it? This is the moment that it's got to go out? Because you don't have a schedule, so you could become someone like a perfectionist or whatever.
Yeah, well, I'm not a perfectionist, so that helps a lot. I'm really finicky about scripts, and I, generally speaking, don't cut myself off when I'm writing a script. A good example of that is I've been working on a script about the fall of the German Republic for a year at this point, I think, and I just won't. It gave me intense frustration in December that I couldn't put out the final touch on the script, but I just choose not to skimp out on writing. So it could be that in your creative process, whatever it is that you are the most passionate about, that you think is the most critical to your channel, that you just won't skip on that. You can be a perfectionist or a semi-perfectionist and just stick to it. I'd say that when it comes to like graphics and animation, sometimes I just kind of have to roll with what works because yeah, I'm not a perfectionist at heart, and I think that's kind of obvious if you look at some of my older stuff. So I don't have a great question about when to stop. I'd say that there are times when I'm trying to animate, I get super frustrated, and I either come back to it a little bit later and push through. That's my general strategy for getting through blocks. Or if it's just really atrocious, I'll just slap a picture there. No one knows the difference if I animate 2 seconds less of video because I just put a picture on it and just decided to, that's my weakness, and therefore I'm not gonna stress so much about my weakness. I'm gonna get up a piece of content. So be perfectionist only in the thing that you think is the most important, and everything else, I think it's the Hank Green 80-20 rule, right? Just get 80-90% of the way there and call it a day, because we are in the end on a platform where you got to upload something sometime.
Yeah. Is there anything that the We Create EDU community could do to help you and your channel?
Just keep being the We Create EDU group. I think I said at the beginning that I've gotten value out of the community already, just by the fact that it exists and that there's a camaraderie there is fantastic, especially now that we're branching off into like actually meeting people in real life at these conferences. I think is great. If I could, I guess I noticed that there is, a lot more science creators on the Slack, and I don't think that's a bad thing at all. Just always give hugs to my social sciences people and my politics folks and anyone from history, like especially politics, because we get people who cover politics tend to get slapped in the face a lot, because even if you're trying to be educational, people tend to disagree with you and assume you're like some sort of partisan with an agenda. And so give a politics junkie a hug and just be who you are. EDU, you're great. We create EDU. I love the platform.
I think there's a channel for social science and arts and all that now in the Slack, so you can all gather together and.
Yeah, during your recreating of the hashtags and the little groups, that's nice. And I definitely think that everyone's welcome. It's clear, especially the welcome potatoes. It's clear everyone's welcome. This is just give your social science people a hug when you see them in real life or on the chat, and I'll be happy. And just if you have additional questions for me after the stream is over, please ask them. I will answer them, assuming that they're like not like personal questions. And if you guys need something from me, or I don't know, if there's something I can provide to the community, let me know, because I've gotten value out of it and I'm happy to put value back in. Part of the reason I want to do this live stream is just to do my best to say I'm not perfect, but I'm learning, and therefore I think at this point in my YouTube journey I can give a little bit back by talking to you guys and giving a little information on what I've done.
And I think everyone sharing their stories and how they got there and their mistakes is always really, really helpful. So you guys can ask questions either in the comments section of this video, or head over to the Slack and ask your comments there. So
awesome. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for joining. And thank you so much for sharing your story.
You got it.